All right, let's jump right into this explainer, because we are looking at a literal ground-up rewrite of how human societies are built. For centuries, the recipe for building a country was pretty straightforward. You fight for a piece of land, you draw some borders around it, and boom, the people inside those borders are your citizens. But today, the internet is flipping that completely upside down.
So what happens when a state starts with a Wi-Fi connection instead of a physical border? That's the core question I want you to keep in mind today. We're going to unpack the origin stages of these digital nations, directly comparing the peaceful, opt-in startup societies envisioned by tech optimists with the dark, subversive online networks engineered by extremists.
Here is our roadmap for today. First, the borderless digital state. Second, Balaji's cloud-first vision. Third, ISIS and virtual caliphates. Fourth, architectures of digital communities. Fifth, moving from cloud to land. And finally, redefining the nation-state. Let's get into it.
Section 1. The borderless digital state. Moving beyond physical geography.
The crucial point here is that in a hyper-connected world, organizing power purely by physical proximity just doesn't make a whole lot of sense anymore. Think about it. You probably have way more in common with folks in your favorite online community than you do with your literal next-door neighbors, right? A traditional nation-state packs millions of ideologically opposed people into one geographic box. But the internet? It lets us find perfectly aligned individuals spread all across the globe.
Section 2. Balaji's cloud-first vision. Building a peaceful network state.
Tech entrepreneur Balaji Srinivasan proposes a model that completely flips the traditional concept of sovereignty on its head. Instead of starting with land and forcing people into it, you start with aligned minds and acquire the land later. It's a total bottom-up approach. You build a parallel society in the cloud first. Organize your population, build an internal crypto economy, and only then do you start buying physical property.
So, how does this actually work in practice? Well, it kicks off with what's called a startup society. This is basically just an online community united by a singular moral innovation, something simple like longevity is good. From there, it levels up into a network union capable of collective action. Then, they start crowdfunding real-world physical properties all over the globe, becoming a network archipelago. Finally, by proving their scale with an on-chain census, they go for diplomatic recognition. Boom, you've got a network state. Cloud first, land last, but not land never. That quote right there is the entire architectural philosophy in a nutshell. The digital cloud comes first. It's where the culture forms, but it can't just stay a group chat forever. To be a true state, it absolutely has to anchor back to physical reality.
Moving to Section 3, ISIS and virtual caliphates, extremism in the digital age. And I want to be super clear here. We are analyzing this purely to understand the structural mechanics of how borderless networks operate.
To understand their infrastructure, we really have to grasp the concept of on-life extremism. The internet isn't just this fake virtual world anymore. It's our actual physical reality. ISIS realized this way before most traditional governments did. They engineered an architecture that flawlessly blends offline behavior with algorithmic online echo chambers, making radicalization this dynamic, hybrid experience.
When they lost their physical ground in Syria and Iraq back in 2018, they didn't just pack up and go home. They pivoted. Hard. They recognized that the state didn't actually need to be physical to survive. They essentially defined their territory as existing in the cloud, right in the digital spaces where Gen Z constructs their identities. If the physical state falls, the virtual caliphate just lives on in the network.
Now, compare this origin stage to Balaji's model. While that starts with a peaceful startup society, the ISIS model starts by aggressively infiltrating mainstream youth culture. They embed their narratives into gaming, memes, TikTok aesthetics. Once someone clicks, the algorithm does the heavy lifting. Then, they use a deliberate funnel to migrate those users off the open web and into closed, encrypted digital enclaves like Telegram to harden that loyalty.
It's a staggeringly massive operation. We're talking a highly resilient network of networks. They hit the surface web for broad recruitment, dip into the deep web for encrypted chats, and use the dark web for illicit coordination. It is a wildly robust cloud infrastructure that constantly outpaces moderation by just hopping from platform to platform.
Section 4. Architectures of digital communities. Comparing the structural blueprints.
So look at this stark contrast. Both rely on a digital-first origin, but the tech serves totally opposite moral intents. The network state leans on public blockchains for total transparency and consensual governance. Meanwhile, The virtual caliphate relies on dark web anonymity, heavy encryption, and algorithmic echo chambers to completely isolate targets without detection. Same digital foundation, entirely different building blocks.
And here is the absolutely crucial point about their origin stages: the mechanism of alignment. How do you get a scattered group of people to act as one cohesive unit? Balaji's peaceful model uses a positive, transparent proposition that people voluntarily opt into. The extremist model, on the other hand, actively hijacks adolescent identity. They weaponize popular culture and use extreme identity signaling to forge this rigid, violent in-group boundary.
But honestly, regardless of what the network is trying to achieve, this quote hits the nail on the head. Getting 1 million casual followers on an app, that's easy. But creating deep, highly aligned affinity among a borderless population, affinity so strong that they can act collectively as a state, that is the ultimate challenge for both of these models in the cloud.
Section 5. From Cloud to Land. Manifesting Physical Reality from Digital Networks.
So how do we actually bring this back to the real world? For Balaji's model, the transition is peaceful and entirely economic. The community crowdfunds physical nodes globally. We're literally already seeing this happen. Projects like the 2024 Network School near Singapore act as physical campuses where technologists from a digital community can actually gather, live, and build together in real life.
On the flip side, the virtual caliphate's transition from cloud to land relies on weaponizing that digital isolation into real-world violence. They bridge the gap by pushing supporters in the digital realm to launch lone wolf attacks right where they physically live, or to travel as fighters. It's a devastating proof of concept that what happens in the digital sphere has very real, physical consequences.
Section 6. Redefining the nation-state. The future of sovereignty.
When we lay it all out like this, you can see that despite being entirely opposed in their moral and operational goals, they both prove that the internet is an incredibly powerful substrate for building complex societies outside of traditional borders. Both of these models start by capturing minds in the cloud, they use digital infrastructure to build intense alignment, and they eventually force that alignment into physical reality.
The big takeaway from this explainer is that the internet isn't just for sending emails and memes anymore. Whether it's being used to crowdfund utopian societies built on transparency, or to engineer extremist networks built on subversion, the digital first state is already a structural reality. The era of states defined purely by geography is over.
So I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought to chew on. If the actual infrastructure of the state is rapidly moving to the cloud, who ultimately governs the virtual territories of tomorrow? Because as our physical and digital lives completely fuse together, understanding the mechanics of these network states is absolutely vital for navigating whatever comes next. Thanks for exploring this complex architecture with me today.